This is TWiT.
All right, we have a whole lot of VR to discuss. None of it involves spinal surgery that I know of. In this week's chat with Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica, who joins us now. Welcome, Sam.
Hello, hello. Happy to see you guys in the real world.
It's good to see you. You don't have any of that burn-in on your face this week. You obviously haven't been playing VR that much.
I took a bath. I took a VR bath. I went and just had my face. Here's the secret. Just put your head underwater and don't breathe for about 20 minutes and all the stuff will go away.
Oh, you just like wrinkle up like a raisin.
So when you say VR bath, it wasn't like a virtual bath. It was an actual bath to wash off the VR.
No, I meant a post-VR. Yes, to wash off the shame that is going into a forced VR cave of existence. But yeah, there's a couple of VR things going on this week. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So first of all, let's start with Oculus. This was news that I thought was interesting. I think it was yesterday. Apparently shutting down its internal content creation studio. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, this is a specific part of Oculus. So Oculus Studios is the internal developer home that makes stuff for Oculus Rift, all of their stuff, including the home kit, which is the Oculus Rift, and then the Gear VR, which is their collaboration with Samsung, and that takes your smartphone and all that sort of thing. Now, Oculus Story Studio is an offshoot. It's a special part of Oculus that develops narrative stuff. So stories that are not very interactive, but they happen all around you while you've got your head in VR. They made that content up until yesterday. There was just a notice that went up yesterday from Jason Rubin over at Oculus confirming that Oculus Story Studio was no more. And in fact, his post did not clarify so much as a Variety report followed up later on to say, oh, they're all totally done. Every single narrative sort of experience, meaning every sort of experimental story that was being developed inside of Oculus headquarters was canceled immediately, and about 50 staffers were encouraged to apply for jobs at other parts of Oculus. So it sounds like it was a pretty sudden thing for them to say, we're not doing this part of Oculus anymore.
How much of an impact has Oculus Story Studio had? I mean, we've definitely seen some like immersive VR, different approaches to VR storytelling. Is this an indication that it's just kind of not as big a deal as some might think it might be?
I would say it's the opposite. I think what's happening here is Oculus has noticed how many other people, independent, third-party, indie studio style groups, especially artists, are starting to embrace VR for storytelling. Okay. You guys talked to me right after South by Southwest, in which I saw After Solitary, which was an independently funded, nothing to do with Oculus story about a man who'd been in solitary confinement in and out for 5 years. And the story was just incredible. Oculus, on the other hand, I have never written about a single one of Oculus's narrative experiences. That's not to say they're not any good, but they haven't caught headlines. And a lot of these other sort of folks, including movie studios and small teams, are starting to do stuff. So what I think really happened was somebody in terms of bean counting said, we don't need to produce this internally anymore. Let's try something else. Let's try taking that budget and handing it to celebrities or handing it to hot sounding groups and say, hey guys, how about you take this thing you've been working on by yourself? We're not going to have you as a full-time employee, and you're going to make stuff that happens to be exclusive to Oculus because we handed you, I don't know, a $30,000 check or something like that. So I think that's what's going to happen, is that you're going to see narrative or semi-narrative things, the kind of stuff that, for example, they had an Oculus thing that won an Emmy last year. It was a short called Henry. You can get it for free on Oculus still at this point. It's a little porcupine having a birthday and feeling sad and then feeling happy again. It's very Pixar-esque, very bubbly and animated. I think they're just going to start paying other people to kind of make that stuff and then lock it down. So if, for example, Snoop Dogg decides to make a VR music video, maybe Oculus will go to him and say, hey, Snoop, Mr. Dogg, here's a bunch of money. Don't let Vive have it, and things like that.
So what about the VR for Good, that Creators Lab? I think we talked about it for you. That was under Oculus. Was it projects like that? Are those going to stay around? Or are those outside the Oculus studio.
Those appear to be outside the studio. I think that Oculus really likes to say that they've got these initiatives where they're handing grants to people who are outside of Oculus. So I think that's all going to persist. Ruben, in his note, kind of talked about all of the different initiatives that Oculus is interested in terms of saying, look at how creative and for good and for advocacy and that kind of storytelling that virtual reality could do that other things can't. So that's not going to go away. It's just Oculus taking its money and sort of shifting it around and realizing having 50 people doing its own narrative stuff inside of Oculus is not their best value. I personally think they may lose some real opportunities for weird tinkering and discovery by not having sort of an internal incubator for these sorts of things, because I do think narrative VR is going to continue to evolve. Just the idea of you being able to be inside of a film experience with your hands. And that's what Oculus has only begun to touch the surface of, because they have a thing called Oculus Touch. That's their newer product. It's the handheld controllers that didn't ship originally with Oculus, but they're trying to get people to buy it more. And I do think having hands involved in these sort of story scenes could be really interesting. But they had a virtual comic project that debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival just a few weeks ago, and we were going to get that later this year. That may not happen. So we don't know exactly how much fallout there's going to be for things that were in development and ultimately canceled. We don't get to hear a lot about what Oculus is cooking, the experiments that don't happen. I know there's a lot of those. So I personally can't wait for 2 to 5 years from now when sort of the archives of the experiments within Oculus's early days come to light. But some of those are probably never going to see store shelves as a result of this announcement.
Well, I know you might have been in VR for the last 2 hours, so you might not have heard this, but there was some breaking news that Mark Zuckerberg talked about a Facebook TV, like a new, just promising to have like a sort of a YouTube TV-like thing for Facebook. Right. Do you think that's associated? Do you think that they're going to combine those two things?
It depends on who. I know YouTube also just announced an initiative of celebrity powered channels, and I would imagine that they're not going to be internally developing. I think Facebook they know that the stuff that gets shared on Facebook is stuff that's made by other people that are known names. I don't think Facebook is going to create its own TRL. They're not going to have their own Carson Daly. They're going to find someone you've heard of and generate that content, I believe. But it's all up in the air, because again, how are we going to view this stuff? Is it going to be that 360-degree video stuff? If so, that stuff is not real VR, and it kind of sucks. If it's going to be totally polygonal, that's all. I want to see what they're cooking. That could be very interesting, because it could also be a money pit. Because if there's, it's chicken or egg. People go, oh, there's not content in VR, so they don't buy it. But if people don't buy it, there's no content. I'll be curious to see how that one shakes out.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about a few games. You've been spending some time with a game that released a few weeks back on the PlayStation VR called Statik. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, my goodness. So this is a game that I had not caught up with until this week. I had been reminded about it coming out. It's on the PlayStation VR. It's exclusive there. And the reason is it handles VR and limited VR in a really interesting way. Now, with PlayStation VR, the way it works is it senses your head moving around, and it can sense the controller in your hands, as in just the generic DualShock, which is standard joysticks, buttons kind of guy, because it has a little light on the back of the controller, and PlayStation VR has a camera that senses that light. So strap on the headset, hold the controller, start this game. You're sitting in a chair. You're strapped into the chair. You're part of a crazy research experiment. And in your hands, what you see is not your controller. What you see is this crazy puzzle box. And as you tap around buttons on your controller, they manipulate and activate different parts of the puzzle box. So it really does feel like your hands are trapped inside of this box. Now, anyone watching the webcast can see right now a sample of this. So buttons, joysticks, triggers, they all activate different little spots. And there's a variety of these puzzle boxes. And you're just, there's a guy who's kind of mocking you, not really helping you out. And you're just supposed to sit there and figure out what the heck is going on. So the VR stuff is a mix of using your hands with the controller and looking around the room. So there's parts of it that make me go, it doesn't need to be in VR. We could just have the screen show this controller. But there's other parts that to describe them would spoil it. But to be able to be immersed in the environment is part of the puzzle. This, to me, is one of the most clever applications of virtual reality I have seen especially in the sit down space as opposed to stand up and walk around. I'm absolutely blown away by it. Anyone who's curious about it, do not watch it on YouTube. Do not stream it on Twitch. Find a way to play it if you enjoy Portal style puzzling.
It looks very kind of almost claustrophobic to a sense to have your hands in this box and looking around. I did some reading around. People are saying it's very difficult. Like the puzzles are really difficult to figure out, and that some people are just like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't last as long as I needed to solve the puzzle because of kind of the claustrophobic aspects of it. Did you find that?
Well, there are a couple of spots where the logic makes no sense. So some of my favorite puzzles are on early goings, and they're incredibly good at having every single thing you need to know arranged around your virtual play space. There are other puzzles in which the step to take, once you go and cheat, and I absolutely, because the game's already been out, I got stuck at a couple points and cheated because I'm like, I'm not going to sit here for 2 hours to try to guess this. I would say there were 3 puzzles within an otherwise, I don't know, 2.5 hour, 3 hour game that made me go, what the heck is going on? But I think compared to some of the really weird and hard puzzle games I've loved in the past, that I would say is that's tolerable a pain in the butt as I've ever dealt with. Right. So totally not, especially the early going. I think if you can get through the first couple of puzzles, you'll see what's going on and you'll be hooked. And by then you'll do what I did, cheat just for that little moment. And then as soon as you see the solution, turn off the YouTube and go back.
Yeah, you kind of get your flow. Yeah, it shares a lot, I think, like right at the beginning when I started watching this footage, keep talking and nobody explodes, kind of that idea of having this box and figuring out what you do in what order and all that kind of stuff. So cool puzzle game approach.
And I will say, because of that one and this one are similar in that if you are stuck, you have friends who may be sitting on the couch. Not that you're going to have people over while you're playing VR, but if someone else is there, they can see on your TV screen what's going on and go, wait, did you notice this thing? Did you notice that thing?
Right.
And that's kind of clever. I was sad and lonely in my VR cave when I solved it myself. I wish either of you had been there to help my wayward soul.
It's too bad you couldn't play it on your Switch and bring it to a bar like you do with your Zelda.
Oh, goodness.
Someday they'll have
sorry, you
Switch
just
VR.
said the S word, and I go totally off if you
Come back. We've got one more thing to talk to you about. Finally, a new game by Bethesda called Prey. That actually hit the shelves today. What's to love about this one?
Prey, we have not had that much time to play it because Bethesda, the makers of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, they believe now that they don't need to give games to the press very early because they are very well known. Words like Fallout and Skyrim have a lot of cachet for nerds and even just people who are not giant nerds but like games. So we haven't played very much. Ars Technica has a piece up with Kyle Orland's first 5 to 6 hours. It's got some video on there. And it's interesting because the name Prey has been attached to a couple of games. There was a game, I want to say 10, 12, 15 years ago. I can't remember how long ago, but it was this sort of sci-fi meets American Indian story of exploring past, present, and future. And it was kind of actiony. And then it got rebooted and canceled. And I got to see a behind-the-scenes look at what this game would have looked like. And it was total Blade Runner, jumping between buildings, bonkers, high-speed, flashy neon. That never came out. This is the exact opposite of the one that got canceled. This is very slow. It's all about you being part of an institute that is giving you, it starts out with this sort of Groundhog Day style thing where you go in for training, things turn awry, all of a sudden you wake up again as if nothing happened, but there's just one little note saying, you are reliving a bad time, FYI, weird stuff is happening. That's not really much of a spoiler because that happens so early on. But it's just to say that is just one example of the game having things may not be what they seem as a major element. And ultimately, it's about being trapped in a space station, which is just completely dotted with stuff. And that is a very Bethesda-like thing, and also a very Dishonored-like thing. The guys who made, some of the people who made the video game Dishonored were a part of this. And one of the shortest ways of putting this is that little bit of Dishonored flavor, where there's a lot of different ways to solve a crazy adventure, is just smothered in high-gloss sci-fi. And that, to me, is just, I'm willing to play it, even if it's average. take all those words, combine them, and we'll give it a shot. And so far, we have not been turned off. We have not been displeased. Been a lot of weird surprises, really slick looking, and just the environment of the space station that you're on is stellar. It's just cool. And I've got it running on my PC right now in 4K resolution, and it is screaming.
Wow.
So that I'm really happy about that. I am geeking out.
How do you feel about Bethesda's kind of decision last October to kind of withhold releases like this until a day of or shortly before?
Well, I mean, they clearly don't know who I am. Like, I feel like I should be getting all of the video games super early. I actually, honestly, I think for the most part, game studios don't need to just hand games to whomever. I think what's really important is understanding how people find and discover games. And in a Twitch and streaming era, that whole idea of having to hand a game to a single magazine for an exclusive and expect people to read that and have that drive the sales, it's not the same as people just who are big fans starting out, going trial by fire, being willing to be beta testers for broken games. Dishonored 2 in particular, really launched messily, and people were still willing to buy it and sort of jump in and figure it out there. I think that's a developer by developer strategy. I will say I'm playing another game right now, which I'll talk about next week. I'm really enjoying it by a small indie team, but it's got one bug. And because I got it kind of in advance, I was able to reach out to these developers and say, hey guys, this one thing keeps messing up when I play. And they've been back and forth with me. They asked for the crash logs on my computer. They were helping me diagnose it. And that to me is something interesting from a review perspective in the modern gaming era, because games don't always work. You put them in, even in your Xbox or PlayStation, let alone your computer, you'll put it in and it'll have a bug, or it won't work with this driver, or that sort of thing. And I do think when a game maker doesn't get a game into people's hands early, that's never going to reflect as well as a developer who is even helping the press and the early lookers go, oh, we want everyone to really enjoy this game. We are dedicated to making this game work on launch day and in the weeks to come. So I just think that's sort of a thing that doesn't get reflected when you type a number into a review. You know, when a review ends with 8.5 out of 10, you don't factor in developer didn't respond to bug report into that score necessarily. But that matters way more in the modern era than it did back in the 80s and 90s when you just assumed your cartridge would work.
Right. Yeah. Very good point. Cool. Well, now I have a few things that I wish that I could play, but I don't have either of these VR systems. Well, I guess one is PC. So yeah,
every week I tell you guys, come on over to my creepy place. Board games, VR, shut all the lines, keep it dark.
It'll be a weekend of games.
Weekend creeping out in Sam's.
He has a futon.
Was that?
He has a futon.
Oh, well, that's good. Okay, well then I'm sold. I didn't. This is information that was withheld from me.
Oh, right.
God, this whole segment's going on my Tinder profile.
All right. Sam Machkovech, Ars Technica, also can be found on Tinder. No, just kidding. At Sam Red on Twitter. Twitter is what I meant to say. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, get the Jack from Twitter, I'm sure appreciates that one. See you guys. I'll be talking about the game Strafe next week. It is really, really good. That's all I can say for now.
Sounds good, Sam. Have a great weekend.
Take care.